Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a closer look at some recent reported aerial stuff over California and also digging into claims about some pretty old military technology. Stuff that, according to our sources, might have been kept under wraps for, well, decades.
That's right. Yeah, we've got some really interesting source material today. We're diving specifically into audio from third phasing moon Blake Cousins.
Hmm.
It covers several video counts and, the source's take on what they mean.
Okay, so our mission, basically, is to unpack the details and the claims from these sources for you. What was actually seen? What did the military supposedly say? And what do the sources think is going on, up there, maybe behind the scenes?
It's quite a mix. We'll be looking at a strange orb over Hollywood. Then there's a bright light incident, Valentine's Day actually, that the military apparently said was just a test.
Oh.
And also this vintage footage, really old, that the source uses to ask questions about, like early anti-gravity tech.
Okay, let's get into it then. First up, Hollywood, California. There's a video discussed in the source material from someone named James Bond. He was apparently just, hanging out, looked up around 7:30 p.m., saw this white orb moving slow, then bam, turns red and just takes off.
Yeah, the source description of the video notes his steady hand, which is good. He zooms in, you can see this like illuminated thing just hanging there, moving near power lines.
Right.
And what the source finds fascinating, based on their look at that specific video, is what they think it isn't. They argue it's not a drone, not a Chinese lantern, because it stays lit, no flickering, no blinking lights.
Okay.
And the takeoff, the way it just goes at the end, the source describes it like shooting straight up into space, they say.
Yeah.
They actually call it one of the best orb videos they've gotten.
And they definitely lean into the whole mystery of it, don't they, over L.A.
Mm-hmm.
The source kind of throws out ideas, maybe an energy source, some unexplained phenomenon, or even what they call an interdimensional craft, really suggesting something, well, beyond standard tech.
Exactly. Based on how they read that video, it's presented as something that really defies an easy, conventional explanation.
Okay, so sticking with this idea of weird things in the sky, the source material then brings up another California sighting. This one's just a day earlier, February 14th, Valentine's Day.
Uh-huh.
Shot by someone named Killian, early morning. Saw a strange, bright light.
And this is where, according to the source, it gets really interesting. Killian apparently did some digging later and found out the military claimed it. They took responsibility for the light.
Oh, and their reason?
A missile test. That was the explanation giver.
A missile test.
Yeah.
But overpopulated areas, this is where the source really flagged something, right?
Exactly.
They point out how, well, bizarre it seems to run a missile test or whatever it was, right over populated civilized regions.
Yeah, it definitely raises an eyebrow, as the source highlights. The material sort of acknowledges, okay, maybe the media says Trident missile, technically possible, maybe, but then it immediately asks, could it be something else? Maybe what the source calls a false flag, like something made to look like a test but isn't, or propaganda.
Propaganda, like how?
Well, the idea floated is maybe it's a way to signal military strength, like a warning. Don't mess with the USA kind of thing.
That's quite an interpretation from the source. They even speculate, I think, if these California events are part of a, quote, UFO war.
Yeah, they use that term UFO war, suggesting these sightings might be strategically linked, part of some bigger conflict or agenda.
Right.
And connecting this idea of military action or maybe hidden capability, that's when the source brings up this vintage video from the early 1950s.
Ah, yes, the old footage. This is presented in the source as maybe showing military tech from way back then. They describe it as looking like some kind of craft defying gravity or anti-gravity at work in the early 1950s.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, when we say anti-gravity here, based on the source, we mean that speculative idea of tech that counteracts gravity, lets things lift or move unlike normal planes.
Right. And the source seems to see this old video as, quote, evidence of anti-gravity at best. They mention seeing a man in the cockpit, maybe a test pilot, doing what they call a heavy flight maneuver, something they claim they've never seen in regular aircraft.
Okay, so connecting this back, the source is clearly using this old video to ask some pretty pointed questions, aren't they?
Definitely.
Like, what does the military actually know about advanced tech? Or even, they mention alien contact.
And crucially, the source emphasizes this. Why are these 1950s videos showing this potential capability supposedly surfacing now? Why leak them?
Right, the timing. So what's the source's conclusion on that? Why now?
Their opinion, it's pretty explicit in the source material. To me, it seems like they are preparing us for disclosure. That's the quote. The idea being leaking this old footage, if it is suppressed tech, is maybe part of a strategy, a way to ease people into the idea of advanced, non-conventional stuff. Maybe even help explain or contextualize the current sightings, like the orb.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. What's the narrative being suggested here based on these specific sightings and the vintage tech claim from the source?
Well, according to this source, it paints a picture where you have these unusual things happening in the sky, like that weird orb. At the same time, you potentially have the military giving explanations that the source finds questionable, like a missile test over LA.
Right.
And then, alongside all that, old footage pops up hinting at advanced tech that's supposedly been hidden for like 60 plus years. All of this, in the source's view, points towards something significant unfolding, perhaps leading towards some kind of official disclosure about phenomena or tech that isn't common knowledge.
Okay, so we've just taken a deep dive into these specific claims from our source material. We looked at the recent California sightings, that interesting white then red orb over Hollywood, and the bright light on Valentine's Day that the military reportedly said was a missile test.
Mm-hmm.
And we also looked at that vintage 1950s video, which the source holds up as potential evidence of anti-gravity tech, kept secret for decades.
Yeah, and these specific accounts, these interpretations, they span different times, different kinds of phenomena, and they raise some key questions that the source itself poses for you, the listener, to think about. Like, from this perspective, what do these sightings really mean? Why would the military, as claimed here, run a test over populated areas? It seems odd.
Yeah.
And what does that vintage footage, if it's authentic and was suppressed, like the source suggests, tell us about historical capabilities, and how might that connect to what's happening now?
Ultimately, these sources seem to be asking us and asking you to consider the gap. The gap between what might be known or possible with aerial tech and unexplained sightings and what's actually told to the public. It encourages a critical eye on official stories and new info, even old info resurfacing, viewed through the interpretations presented here.
Right, and based on the source talking about a potential UFO war and floating that idea, that really interesting idea that the military might be preparing us for disclosure by leaking old footage, here's a final thought for you to chew on. If we take the source material's perspective, what could be the ultimate goal here? What's the intended message or the desired outcome of these sightings and video releases, assuming they are connected and orchestrated, as the source seems to suggest?
Keep watching the skies, definitely, and keep thinking critically about what you see and also about what the sources you engage with are telling you.